I'm doing this outside on a very wet weekend. We've had a hurricane come through the entire southeast, and so I'm trying to squeeze this in before the rain, and I don't have a lot of light in my garage, so I've moved outside to a dry spot on my driveway, but hopefully I can get this done without getting rained out. So on a Jeep, on the front axle, we're here, this is the driver's side front tire, and on the left side of the axle there's a hose which goes into the axle, and the hose comes up, goes behind this shield, and then stops right at about the top of the front shock upper mount. If you look down from above on the engine, it's kind of hard to see, but basically right there I can touch the one-way cap, the one-way valve on top of that hose. So what we're going to do, and that cap ends up being about an inch above my tire. What we're going to do is put on a new hose that's longer so that we can extend it up to basically just right below the hood line. Now what we're going to use to do this is, I've got 8 feet of 5/16 inch rubber fuel line, and this is the same size hose as the OEM, and we'll just cut this to length and it should do the trick. The first step will be to remove the old diff breather tube. Okay, so I have the hose removed from the end, and I'm just pulling it out of the clamps to get it out of this top clamp. I'm gonna use a screwdriver. Okay, here's the hose completely removed, and you can see the valve. We've just got to take that valve out. Now that's not as easy as it might look. It's going to take a little effort. Now because I want to save the valve and use it again, this is basically how I figured out how to get this thing out without breaking it. And I've already done this, so but basically I take a little scalpel and make an incision along the length of the valve, just to give some slack, and then that allows me to open it up a little bit there, relieve some of the tension. And there we go. I can use that again. Now what I'm going to do is I like to take the hose and start from where I want it to end up and route it down to the area that it needs to go to. It's almost always easier to feed it through that direction rather than to try to force it to go up a path you want it to follow. So that's what I'm going to do. Show you here. I got a choice to make. Do I want it to come on this area near the steering column, or I think I'm going to route it maybe inside these tubes, just to keep it away from anything that's a moving part. So I think I've decided I'm going to mount this about right here, And I'm going to route it through here. I thought about putting it here, but I was concerned that it might rub on this, and this already doesn't look too stable. So then it's going to come around, and it's going to have to curve back in underneath this to get in the channel where it's clamped. But that'll put it up high, out of the way, and should be a good location. So I put the cable in that clamp back in its original place, and now I've just got to there's a clamp right in there, and you can feel it slide into that. Now, just got to route it to the axle. There. See that we got that on there. Nice and tight. And it's routed away from anything that might snag. Up into the clamp. And that's it. I wanted to talk a little bit about installing a tube for the rear differential. I actually did that yesterday, and so I can't really show you a video of the installation process, but I did want to explain what I did, because when I was looking for information about this on YouTube, there were a lot of different things, a lot of different options, and I wasn't exactly sure how I wanted to route everything, and so it took me longer than the job actually should, just because I was trying to be cautious. And I didn't want to waste any rubber tubing. But for this job, you use 5/16 inch fuel hose. And I originally bought 12 feet, but I ended up using about 8 feet to route it for the rear. I'm under the Jeep, and mine is a 2016 Jeep JK Rubicon. And so here's the tube coming up out of the differential vent. And originally it was routed very closely along this, and it went up to a little bracket up here. I'm trying to get, not to get dirt in my face. Now, the problem with that little bracket, and maybe this will be is that it ended up just being a piece of plastic that had tape, essentially like duct tape, wrapped around the tube. So when I took that off, I wasn't too sure how sturdy that was, and I wanted to come up with a better solution. So I actually went to Lowe's and got a little bracket that was thin, and it was basically a 1-inch bracket, and it was sort of malleable, so I could make it fit the two posts there. And I wrapped the inside of it with some Gorilla tape to provide a softer contact point for the tube. So I was able to maintain that. I liked that contact point coming from the cable. And I've allowed a little bit more slack than what was in the original line, just because I've got a 3-inch lift. So then the question was what to do with that from that contact point. I could have run it over here by the frame, but I was a little bit concerned with it being so close to the exhaust pipe. So what I did is I ran it up along the gas line here. Now, I'm outside the wheel well looking in. And as you can see, there's where the gas line is running. Now, one thing, when I first routed it, I had the cable coming right here along the frame, and that seemed kind of precarious. And so I really wanted to get it inside this bracket. And so what I did is that I just backed the end of the hose back out to about here so I could redirect it on the other side of these two hoses. Now, that was a little tricky. I had to use a screwdriver and a little bit of patience, and it took about 5 minutes, but I finally got that routed through there. And then it just follows up into here where it's going up into the tail light. Now, as you can see, there we go. I've got this zip tied to the taillight cable so that when it sits in there, it's upright about as high as can be. So that's it.